Welcome to 8-Bit Keys. This is going to be my first keyboard review. And in my first review, I wanted to cover the Casio PT-80. Now, the reason is because I actually owned this as a kid back in the 1980s. I was probably about 10 years old, and it was my first ever keyboard. And I actually picked this out. Now, this exact unit I have in my hands is not the one I had as a kid. That one was probably sold in a garage sale 30 years ago. But one of the interesting things I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to be able to tell you how I thought about this keyboard when I was 10 versus what I think about it now that I've acquired this one on eBay.
So let's start with the basics. I think this was first released around 1984, but I haven't been able to confirm that. It's basically analog even though it looks digital. It has a single voice, more or less, and it has 32 mini keys and 8 different instruments. It uses 5 AA batteries, or you can plug it into a wall adapter. It also has a headphone jack, which I'll be using to record directly from this keyboard, so you can hear all of the sounds clearly. When you turn the keyboard on, it does a little intro like this. Now, I said it was monophonic mostly, but let me elaborate on that. As a player, you can only play one note at a time. This was often frustrating to me as a kid because I couldn't play hardly anything, not even chopsticks.
Now, as a kid, I had actually worked out a way to play chopsticks by kind of alternating the keys a little bit, and I'll show you how I did it. Now, the thing about it is, as a kid, the fact that it was monophonic didn't bother me too much because, honestly, I thought all keyboards were. I really didn't know any better. The funny thing is, this keyboard is not entirely monophonic because you can use these chords down here to create some other sounds while you play. Now, to be honest, when I was a kid, I never used these. I didn't really even understand what chords were for. In fact, as far as I was concerned, these sounded bad, and I just didn't want to use them for anything. I also couldn't figure out what these little min and seventh and whatever stood for. Of course, now I know they're to create minor chords and whatnot. There also seems to be a hidden voice somewhere that I'll talk about later. Okay, so it has several drum rhythms you can pick from, but they don't sound a lot like real drums.
You can press the rhythm button again to create a drum fill-in, and you can select a chord if you want.
And, you know, the instruments do not sound particularly all that great either. In fact, here's a sampling for you. Now, you know, as a kid, I never really noticed or even cared that the sounds didn't sound very realistic or that they sounded bad. And the funny thing about it is I'm almost positive that the Casio SK1 was on the shelf at Walmart, Target, Toys R Us, all those places, right alongside the Casio PT-80. And these keyboards sound very different. In fact, let me show you how different they sound. And so you can tell that the SK1 sounds way better, and yet as a kid, for some reason, it just wasn't important to me. I just didn't even notice. All right, so the question has to be asked. Why, as a 10-year-old kid, did I pick this keyboard over many of the more capable keyboards like the Yamaha keyboards, which had at least 4 to 8 note polyphony, or even the Casios like the SK1? Why did I pick this one? Well, I can tell you why. Because as a kid, I was a gadget freak. I liked all things electronic. This keyboard looked very high-tech. It had all these buttons all over it, had this ROM cartridge, and it just really looked high-tech. And so that's really what sold me, is the gadgetry on it sold me. But, looking back, I realized this was a horrible keyboard for me to purchase.
So let's talk about this ROM slot for a moment. This is the same factory demo ROM that came with mine as a kid. It has 4 songs on it. Funny thing is, as a kid, I always thought it was a bit morbid to include a song called Die Lorelei. I mean, who writes a song about wanting someone named Lorelei to die?
You know, I distinctly remember thinking that on many occasions. And of course, now that I'm 40 years old and I've learned to speak German and I've actually been to Germany on several occasions, I immediately recognize the proper pronunciation of that song is actually Die Lorelei, which stands for the Lorelei, which the Lorelei is not even a person. It's actually part of the Rhine River. And so maybe they would have been better off had they named the song on the cartridge The Lorelei instead of Die Lorelei. I think maybe, especially for kids back then, it would have been made a lot more sense. Okay, so with these ROM cartridges, there are a few interesting things that you can do with them. For one, you can play them kind of like a jukebox.
You can select autoplay mode and then see the LEDs will keep moving across the keyboard until you select a song. If you look down here, you'll see these keys are numbered, and that corresponds to which song you want to play. I'll pick 2 for Greensleeves. As the melody plays, you can see the LEDs light up to show you how to play the song. As the song is playing, you can actually change the instrument to something else, or change the tempo, or even select a different beat. But here's the real mystery. Listen closely and you'll hear a second voice in the background.
So where is that coming from? So, I mean, you can tell that obviously the synthesizer has at least 2 voices, but for some bizarre reason, they're not letting the player actually play more than one voice. I was always baffled by that, even as a kid.
As far as the internals, this sucker has 2 circuit boards, one on top of another, and it's mostly analog circuitry. So the irony is, as a kid, I thought I was getting the most high-tech keyboard, but in reality I was getting something very old-fashioned.
And there's one more thing that I want to mention about this keyboard, and I think it's a severe limitation.
If you look at a regular 88-key piano keyboard and you were to reduce it down to 32 keys, you would think you would pick this area here, but for some reason Casio picked the higher area. As a result, this keyboard is all treble. It can't produce any bass sounds at all, and while it does have a tuning potentiometer on the bottom, there's no way to transpose an entire octave.
Okay, so I tried to stitch together some kind of multi-track music for you so that you could, hear what you could do if maybe you had 10 of these keyboards. And let me tell you what, it is difficult. I gave up after a while. Because not only does this keyboard have bad sounding instruments, and not only is it monophonic, which makes it impossible to play chords and stuff like that correctly, but it also is all treble. I can't create any bass. So this is probably one of the most challenging keyboards I have in my collection as far as trying to produce anything that sounds cool on it. So you're probably never going to see me producing a video where I've done all the music entirely on this keyboard. I might try to fit it in occasionally, maybe along with another keyboard, but by itself, I just don't think I can use it. So all in all, as a kid, I thought this was really like the coolest thing, but looking back, I realized this keyboard was really pretty inferior to the other ones out there. And, I still have a little bit of fondness for it just for nostalgia, but I don't actually think it's a very good keyboard. The ROM cartridge, well, I thought it was cool. I never really learned how to play any music from it, especially being that I could only play one note at a time, so there wasn't much challenge there. And I think it was more of a gimmick, a sales gimmick than anything, and it worked. So I have to give Casio credit for that, but I wish they had focused their efforts on making the keyboards polyphonic or better sounding or anything. Maybe like a switch to where you could select different octaves. That would have been great. But anyway, I hope you found this interesting. I'm going to do several more keyboard reviews kind of sporadically throughout performances and stuff. So I'll try to mix it up a little bit. Every other episode I'll try to do a review and one will be like a performance. So I'll see you next time.